Good afternoon, guys, and welcome back to Mark Anthony's Music Picks. Today's episode 115. We're up to episode 115, and today I was inspired by the March snowstorm that just came through. I live outside of Philadelphia, so we're experiencing like a 3 or 4 inch snow event, and it's funny, the snow events that you get in March, they're usually the ones that have the most drama because there's more like warm air for the storm systems to mix with, so you get some pretty interesting stuff. So right now it's really windy and nasty out, but I took advantage of this and I've been listening to like snowy dub techno-ish related tunes all day today, and I felt inspired to do another episode for you guys involving some of my dub related sounds. So for today's episode, I have 5 records that I want to go through for you, and I hope all the dub techno fans out there enjoy this. My first pick for you is one that came out in 2019. This is by an artist named Oculus, and this released on AE Recordings, which is a sub-label of Thule, which is run by Thor. And Thor is a prominent Icelandic techno producer, sometimes making dub techno, but more in the vein of that very spaced out, reverberated techno that's like not pure dub techno, but it's right on the fringe of it. And if you were gonna play a dub techno set, pretty much anything that's on the AE label would be fair game. I don't think anybody would give you a hard time for playing these types of tracks. And I wanted to talk about this record today because I feel like this is criminally underrated. I looked at Discogs so I listened to the record front to back today, and it's one of those 4-trackers where like everything's good. A lot of times there'll be a 4-tracker that has one really nice track on it, and I just sit there for like weeks debating like, do I want this thing on my shelf or not? But this would not meet that criteria. This is all 4 tracks are good, and I just can't believe that it only has 93 owners on Discogs. Like when I spend a lot of time on Discogs and I sift through popular releases, a lot of times I'll click on the recommendations section down at the bottom, and you see run-of-the-mill techno records with 600, 700, 1100 owners, and it just makes me wonder, like, how does stuff like this fall through the cracks? And then very often the recommendations section on Discogs, it sucks. Like I listen to this, it'll have like 17 reviews, and it's like, who wrote these reviews? Like, are these people that like just started listening to electronic music? They have like 6 records on their shelf and they think everything's awesome. Like I I don't get it. Like, this is real, true quality here. If you go to the track A1 on here, Nostalgia, really, really nice melodic techno. Think of something like Abdullah Rashim would do, or some of Donato Dazzi's like slicker, more like melodic tracks would be in the same vein as this. It's really, really nice. That guy, man, I'm gonna butcher this because I don't know how to pronounce his name, but Ewit Morker. It's like Evigt and then Morker. I'm probably destroying that guy's name, but man, like he's really good. So if you like that dude, I'll put a picture of him here. If you like that guy's sound, you're gonna love the A1 Nostalgia, and it's kind of aptly named. It has a throwback feel to it. There's just something that feels like, all right, maybe not a throwback, but it could have came out 10, 15 years ago, and I think people would have believed it. But that's actually not the track I'm gonna feature. There's another track on here called Rigdad. Rigdad. I thought maybe Rigdad is like a city in Iceland, so I Googled it. If you Google that track name there, the only thing you're gonna really get is a picture of this record. So it must be some inside term or just a made up word, but it's really nice. The vibe that I get from Rigdad is almost like, it sounds like a robot that is trying to speak and it can't quite make words, so it just ends up making this like really interesting, like robotic, like sort of synthy sound. I don't know how, or I don't know how that sound is generated in the studio, and I can't even think of what to use to describe it, but it's a really, really cool lead for a track. And if you listen to the rest of the track, it's just got all kinds of clever little like techie percussion and little bits of rolling techiness that just is like, oh man, that's like the kind of track that I absolutely adore. So that's the track I'm going to give you a sample of. And even the B1 and B2, some really nice techie, deep techno, just some real nice thump on here. So if you guys want something that's like criminally underrated, definitely check this record out. And my next pick for you today is by an artist that I've reviewed previously in my Prologue episode. Prologue is was a prominent techno label. I think it shut down in maybe 2016, 2017, somewhere around there. And there was an artist on there named Wndfrm. I think that's what it is because there's no vowels in the name. I always thought it was like wind farm, like a farm of windmills. Well, Wndfrm, if I'm actually saying his name correctly, has another release called Wndfrm, and this is kind of a little obscurity. It's a 10-inch. It's a 10-inch, and I really try to avoid anything that's 10 or 7 because it's just like so underwhelming, and you always lose them in your shelf, in your DJ box. Like you'll just flip right past it because you won't see it. And it's really hard to find them, and they just literally fall between the cracks in your collection. So it's just like, I don't want that. And also, if you're going to charge me the same price for something that weighs half as much, like I just feel like I'm getting ripped. That being said, this is a good 10-inch just to actually invest in. The A side is kind of a droney deal that I would say is interesting, but I'm not much of a drone person. I almost don't have the attention span to make it through drone releases. I have to be really tired and right at the end of my night where it's like, I'll put one more record on before I go to bed. That's when drone works for me, but it does not work when I'm energized. Drone does not work for me at all. Thankfully, the B side has a track called Wndfrm, and that is a really interesting track. One of the most interesting things about it is how slow it is. It's man, that thing's really pushing the lower speed limit. It's like a grandma driving down the road, and you're stuck behind her, or looking to see if how do I get around this person? It's just going so slow. I think you could probably pitch this up and get it to, if you took it to maybe 6 or 7 plus, you could probably mix it in with the rest of a normal set, but at its original tempo, it's almost just designated as listening material. But as you'll see here, it's almost got a wet, overly heavy thump to it. And there's a break in the middle of the record that I captured in the sample here where you're taken into a lull. And when it comes back out of that, I just love how all the elements drop together. So back in 1999, Danny Teneglia, one of my heartfelt hero DJs, somebody that I've looked up to for years and years now because of his production, because of his mix CDs, because of his DJ prowess. In 1999, Teneglia puts out what I think is one of his, it's probably his best mix compilation. He did the Athens compilation on Global Underground, and he started out disc one, track one, with a track called Absolute Reason. And the reason I think that's so marvelous is because if I think what I was doing in 1999, I was just graduating high school. I was subscribed to those record clubs where you could, it was like those mail order records where you could, not records, but you could get like cassettes. And I was buying alternative music like Soundgarden and Stone Temple Pilots and Pearl Jam and freaking John Mellencamp. Like, my musical tastes back then were like so much different than they are now. And from on the hip hop side, I was listening to Notorious B.I.G. and Timbaland and Magoo, characters like that. So I didn't even know that electronic music existed. I didn't know that there was a rave scene. I didn't know that there was an underground club culture that had existed for probably 15, 16, 17 years before that. I was absolutely oblivious to it. It wasn't until I was invited out to a club in 1999 that I started to get wind of it. But even then, when I was at the club, I wasn't there for the music. I was just hanging out with my boys and trying to get girls' numbers. So what's interesting to me about Teneglia and that 99 CD is how far ahead of the curve he was. So if you think, when did dub techno really start? It probably started with the Maurizio M series. So that puts you at 1995. So 4 years later, Teneglia somehow finds this Italian stereo dancer release. How did he find this? There was no Discogs back then. There was there eBay? Maybe eBay was starting back then, but it probably was super primitive. How did this even land in his hands? How did he recognize the power of it and also have the foresight to make it track one, disc one of his most important, arguably his most important mix CD ever? It was like a stroke of genius, or maybe a stroke of luck that somebody passed it to him, that he discovered it. And then I would say the genius is realizing hey, this thing's a monster. This is something that people really need to hear. And when you go back and listen to Athens now, you can just hear the timelessness of this. If I had to compare Absolute Reason to anything, it's a very unique dub techno track. It kind of sounds like Maurizio's M7 B-side, where it sounds electrical. It sounds like you're in an environment where there's high tension wires everywhere around you, and the air is energized. That's what Absolute Reason is. And man, Teneglia, God bless you for freaking finding this thing. So last year I did an episode on Brock Van Wey because Brock Van Wey has been somebody that I always listen to, especially when he puts out a new vinyl. I became enamored with his sounds when he did the first Echo Space double CD. I liked the original, the double disc with the clouds on it. He had Stephen Hitchell remix a lot of those tracks, and I think it was number 4 or number 5 remix on disc 2 that just blew me away. I would just sit and fall asleep and listen to that thing on repeat all the time. So Brock Van Way is somebody that's always on my radar, but he released an album on a label that's called No One, and I wasn't aware of No One. It was one of those discrete labels that wasn't really available in the US. Like this had distribution that was not in favor of US sellers. So it was like always overseas, always expensive, and you know, to pay, I don't know, $40 plus shipping, I just ended up choosing other records instead of buying this. But over this past winter, I think I was able to get a copy near mint for 40 or $45 from an American seller, so I was really happy with it. So Brock Van Way like isn't credited on this. This is No One LP 001, the first multi, like not just an EP single on No One label. And Brock's not credited, so I think that's also part of the reason that I didn't figure this out until, or find it until later. But you can see it's got like kind of like a snowflake white vinyl, and you can't see it standing out so much on this one. But on some of the other records, there's a touch of like smoky gray or black color in the vinyl. Let's see if I can find one. Yeah, here you go. You can see it's really nice. Like in the world of colored vinyl, some of it ends up sounding really bad because it's almost like they're like chemistry experiments where you it's like they don't have it down to a science when it comes to colored vinyl. It's like every label has to stumble their way through figuring out how to do colored vinyl and work it out so that it doesn't get all pitted and beat up. But anyways, as far as the music goes, this is one of Brock Van Way's best releases because there's a ton of variety on this. Brock doesn't, I mean, when he does the ambient, where it's like straight ambient, it can be hard to distinguish some of the tracks. I'm thinking of some of the releases on maybe the N5 or ND5 label, but when he does his beats, he can be pretty sophisticated with his beats. He'll throw like little curveballs at you with the styles of the beats and slightly broken beats, and I think he really shines when he has the female vocals. He always has this like arsenal of heavenly vocals. Like I don't know where he sources that from, but it's really nice to listen to him. Ironically, the track that I want to feature for you in this episode doesn't have the heavenly vocal, although there's 3 or 4 of them on this triple pack that do have that sound if you want that Brock flavor. This one I singled out. I singled out the B1 because it has an acid lead, and I can't think of another Brock Van Way track that has an acid lead. And I also can't think of another dub techno artist that has like a blatant 303 lead. I'm sure there is, but I just can't think of any right now. And I just thought it was really nice. It was something that I've listened to the B1 on this. I have it ripped and I listen to it in my car all the time. And it's just something that when I'm driving home late at night and I need something to just sort of like keep me awake, but also like maybe I was already out and I just don't want any more banging music, the B1 here is really just does it for me. For my final pick, I have something that's a bit of a stretch, but I don't think it's too much of a stretch to put in this episode. This actually just came out recently. I just got this vinyl this week. This is Priku, if I'm saying his name right, and George Savarati on the label Saver, which is run by the guy whose last name contains the word Saver. So I guess that's how he got the name for his label. And I was stunned by this because I did a few Romanian episodes recently on my channel, and I was talking about Romanian music, and that got me subscribed and sort of searching on Romanian artists. I want to take a quick side road here. So the artist name Priku, right? That's not the artist's real last name. The guy has a last name that doesn't even sound remotely similar to this. There's like a tradition or some kind of a trend in Romanian culture where the artists alias themselves with a U, and I'll put a few examples up on the screen here. I bet I could find 7 or 8 examples of Romanian artists that end with the letter U. And if anybody can comment down below, I don't want to come off as totally ignorant, but I don't understand where that tradition came from. So if any of my Romanian listeners can chime in and say like what the thought process is when the artists alias themselves with like a name that has a U on the end of it, I would love to know. And I mean that with absolutely no snark. I would be genuinely interested to know like where that's coming from, because I find it so interesting. But anyways, it's wild because this is a progressive house slash tech house slash sort of dub techno-ish release that is a really interesting fusion. I can't think of another melodic progressive house track that I would want to potentially drop in like one of those Icelandic type deep dub techno sets, but this is one. And if you listen to the melody in this, when I first heard the melody, there's 2 layers of minor key melody that really play off of each other nicely. When I first heard this, I thought of Luke Chabel, and I was like, what Luke Chabel record does that remind me of? And then it finally dawned on me, it sounds like the You Are Sleeping remix, the one that Luke is arguably most famous for. It's not the same melody line, but it's the same synth or plug-in, or it's like a replica of what Luke used back in whenever that came out. Probably, what was that, 2005 that came out, I think? Yeah, I think that was 2005. But either way, what a cool just kind of out of nowhere from a Romanian artist, Priku, that normally would not go anywhere near this type of sound. You just get this progressive house dub techno melding, and I hope you guys dig this too. All right, that's all for today's episode, guys. I hope you enjoyed this. Make some recommendations down below if you feel inspired by any of these. If you're really feeling any of these, definitely let me know. I'm always down to interact with you guys. That's all for today. Take care.